Meanwhile, the Western war machine is building up with the biggest military alliance since World War II. Troops, ships and tanks are pouring into Saudi Arabia from many nations. Military experts say the gathering multinational force may push Saddam Hussein to strike out at Israel.
Today, Israel moved these Hawk air defense missiles close to its eastern border with Jordan. Intelligence sources say as Saddam Hussein feels more isolated, cornered, he might ignite a conflict with the Jewish state. The logic of that? Israel's air force would shoot back quickly, and most Arabs would then pledge their loyalty to Hussein, regardless of what their leaders agreed to in Cairo. Because of that threat and the vulnerability of arriving U.S. troops, air power over the Arabian Peninsula is on full alert. Navy jets like this FA-18 are controlling the skies over the Persian Gulf. That as massive troop movements continue, phase 2 of the plan to fortify Saudi Arabia. And NBC News has been told that the entire 2nd Marine Division, that's more than 15,000 men, is preparing to go. It will be airlifted from California to Saudi Arabia in the next few days. And more soldiers from the 82nd Airborne in North Carolina are getting ready to go, as are these tanks and men from Fort Stewart, Georgia. The pace of this extraordinary troop deployment and the long tail of supplies leaving every U.S. military port in the world leads analysts to believe that soon the U.S. will have more than 60,000 troops in the Saudi desert.
It's a tense time for the relatives and friends of thousands of foreigners trapped in Iraq. But for some British families at least, the anxiety is over.
Among those arriving back in London from the Gulf over the last 24 hours were some of the last Britons to leave Iraq before the borders were closed. The Iraqis, they say, couldn't have been more helpful.
It was surprisingly easy. They didn't even check our suitcases or anything. We came straight through. They checked our money. I even came out with the Iraqi money. They gave us that back, no problem.
We set off at 4:30, and there was no trouble whatsoever. The Iraqi officials were as pleasant and as courteous and as civil as they possibly could be.
Iraq says that foreigners remaining there and in Kuwait are neither hostages nor prisoners. The country's ambassador to France said borders had been sealed because of what he described as the situation there. Meanwhile, Britons from other Gulf states continue to arrive home, the majority of them families of workers who are staying on.
The week's events have forced at least one Arab leader to take an enormous risk. Saudi Arabia's King Fahd has made an open alliance with the United States, something that few Muslim nations would chance.
At first, Saudi Arabia's extraordinarily cautious King Fahd would only call the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait regrettable. But with Iraqi troops suddenly sitting on his border, the king called on the United States for help.
Faced with this bitter reality and out of the kingdom's keenness to safeguard its territory and protect its vital and economic potential, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia expressed its desire for the participation of sister Arab forces and other friends.
An astonishing request from the leader of Saudi Arabia, an open admission of weakness in a region where strength is so prized.
It's something I think that in many ways upsets many Arabs. It was certainly the hardest decision that he's ever made in his period of being king.
The king has put Saudi Arabia's ties to the U.S. ahead of those to the Arab world, contradicting so much that Saudi Arabia has stood for. 10 years ago, when the Marxist government of South Yemen invaded pro-Western North Yemen right next door to Saudi Arabia, King Fahd, then number 2 in the kingdom, told the world that foreign intervention from the West was totally unacceptable. The Arabs would solve their own problems. Saudi Arabia, which is a very young nation, developed this way. By the end of the 1920s, the man who would become the first king, Saud, as in Saudi Arabia, had drawn all the desert tribes together, in some cases through his own marriages. In the early 1930s, the United States gained its first serious foothold in the kingdom through the development of the country's vast oil reserves. Saud had 45 sons, of whom the present king, Fahd, is one. Before Fahd was king, he was crown prince, though he ran the country on a day-to-day basis.
Fahd is the first Al Saud king to really break with the Bedouin traditions of the past.
It was Fahd who introduced a national system of public education, which would include, for the first time, education for girls. It was Fahd who realized that Saudi Arabia needed an oil policy that would keep prices stable and predictable money flowing. It was Fahd who implemented a national investment policy so that the money would serve future generations. And it was Fahd who told the foreign oil companies in 1978, enough is enough. Saudi oil is Saudi oil. It is our livelihood, and we will control it. In 1982, King Khalid died, and his half-brother, Fahd, the crown prince, became king. Today he rules with 6 of his brothers who make up the inner council, but Fahd is in charge. This week, King Fahd's decision to call in the Americans has resulted in public scorn from Iraq and private admiration from some of the other Arab leaders. In time, his boldness may convince other Arabs to be less shy about their American connection. But first, war must be avoided.
And that's all we have for tonight's special on the crisis in the Persian Gulf. Join us tomorrow night at 6:15 for 3 national news, and again after our Sunday evening movie for another news special on events in the Middle East. I'm Neil Wucker. Good night.